we're going to give this a try and see how this works here. So I've got my stuff ready to do the snowman. There's a picture of him over on your screen there. I've got a little picture here on my canvas for me to remember what he looks like. Okay, so I've got the paints that I'm going to use here. I've got just black and white, if I can find out how to get them into the camera. There we go, black and white. And then all you other need is just really red, yellow, and blue. So there's some red, yellow, and blue. And that's it. You need for the colors for this guy. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of paint to my palette to start. The first thing I'm going to do is going to be the background where the sky and that is. So I'm going to get the camera so you can see my canvas. I think you can see my this here. Okay, so I'm going to put a bit of blue. There we go. I'm going to put some white down next to it. There's some white. I start with my biggest brush. Now I want to put the sky around where the snowman's, not where the snowman is, but around where he's going to be. So I just want to leave like almost like part of a figure eight around here. So I'm going to start by wetting my paintbrush and taking off the extra water. I can put my brush, dip it into the blue, just a little bit on the tip. And I'm going to add some white to it, get a lighter blue, just stir it around. So you have a lot more white than you do blue, lighter blue here. And I'm just going to kind of guess where I'm going to put my circles. So I can start off where I've got the snow and leave room for his hat. So I'm going to start with putting his head here, I'm guessing. That would be okay. So just, and you can adjust him as you go, the shape of your circles and everything. And then I'm going to make his bottom part just a bit bigger. So I'm going to make his bottom part, I want it to come off the edge of the canvas just because I want to. So we're going to have it come off over this side here. Now we know where our snowman's going to be, so instead of wasting painting sky in here, we're going to cover it anyway. I just paint around it. So I'm going to fill in all this area with my blue. Sometimes I dip my paintbrush into the white, sometimes into the blue. I'm going to do kind of dabby and stripy things. I've got some of my baby blue on my paintbrush. I'm going to dab it around. Now I'm dipping into just the tip into the dark blue. I can add a bit here, back into the white, just the white. I can do that right on top, and I can kind of mix it on the canvas, the colors, until I get the color that I want. I'm going to do this all the way around to make it look like kind of a sky. Sometimes I'll dip into my baby blue that I have mixed. Sometimes I'll go right into my white. And sometimes I might add a little bit of dark blue. And I can mix the colors on the canvas a little bit too while I'm doing this. So I'm just going to go all the way around this guy. And if you want to hang him up somewhere, you can also paint your edges and your top too. Then if you don't have it in a frame, it kind of looks nice when the colors go all the way around. So if you want, you can do that as well too. So I'm going to just keep going, working my way around the snowman here. Now you don't have to worry if you get inside this part here, because you can paint that over with white anyway. And I'm using my brush any which way, and I want the lights and the darks to all show, so it kind of just feels like a sky a little bit. Just go down here. And you can paint as fast or slow as you want. If you need some more paint on your palette, you can get some. I'm running out of white paint, so I'm going to have to put some paint on my palette soon. So all around here. Some more white paint for me. White paint. Just keep going all the way around. So this guy's going to be Snowman with a little carol. So I have the little bird on his nose singing a carol, because I think that's fun. But if you want it to be something else on his nose, go ahead. Or put nothing on his nose. You could put a butterfly on his nose. You could put a bat on his nose, whatever you want. Let's just keep going all the way around this guy here. cover all that canvas. I'm still dipping sometimes in my blue, sometimes my baby blue, sometimes my white. I haven't washed my paintbrush yet. I'm doing all this. It's still, I'm just all full of different blues and the white. If you want to add some big puffy clouds, you can. The canvas size I'm painting on is 16 by 20, which is a big canvas, just because that's all I had in my studio and I couldn't make it out. To get some more, I have some more coming in the mail, and those ones will be a little bit smaller, but you can use whatever size canvas you have available too. I'm painting this fast just because. So you can paint this whatever speed you want. And if you want, you can pause the video to catch up to me, or you can fast forward me if I'm taking too long. Just a little bit more in the corner here. And when you're looking at your painting, you can stand back, look at it, see if there's anything that you go, oh, I really don't like that, or I really like that. And if you want to stop and fix something like, oh, I don't like that blob of darker there, so do, you know. I can't stand back because I have my computer right behind me. I'd knock the whole thing over, but you can stand back and look at it before you decide if that's how you want it. Go on. I think that's good for a sky. So when you're happy with your sky, then wash your brush. So wash my brush, and I'm going to dry it off here. Now, because when I do some things on this fellow here, I like his nose, the orange of his nose, and that the colors I used to make the orange, the yellow, and the red, they're a little bit transparent. So the blue will show through a little bit. So I'll come back in with some white when this is dry here, and I'll just paint where the nose is going to go so the blue doesn't show through. And that same thing with the red. The red can be a little bit transparent sometimes. So if you find that the blue showing through a little tiny bit, the lights and darks bothers you, you could paint it white first and then paint the red on top once it dries, or just don't worry about it. So first thing I'm going to do is going to go onto the snowman. So for the snowman, I need some black and some white. So again, I'm going to put on my palette some more white. And I put a little bit of black. And when you're using black with the white, because the black's very strong, just mix a tiny bit of black in your white to get your grays, like a tiny bit, because you can always add more black, but it's really hard to get black out. So I'm going to mix some gray, and with the snowman, I can pretend that the sun is coming from this side here. So this part of his head will be a little bit darker, the circle for his snowball here, because it'll be a shadow because the sun's coming here, and then I'll make a shadow here. And same thing around here. So when I paint the circle on my snowman using white, I use a little bit of gray. I'm going to concentrate more gray down in this area here, and more gray, like if this part here is going to do a shadow here, I'll do more gray there and there. So I'm taking the tiniest bit of black on my paintbrush. See? Tiny. Oh, there's my camera. I don't know if you can see how little I have on there. I'm going to mix that in with probably maybe 10 times the amount of white. That's just approximately, but to get a light gray. So I fixed my light gray, and you can see how it's just a light gray. Hard to tell. You'll see it when I put it on the canvas, probably a bit better in there. So I'm going to start doing the circle for my snowman, and I can go over top of the blue a little bit to make it more of a smoother transition to the sky here. So I'm going to start by making, going around the edge of him. I've got the light gray on my brush here. So I'm going to do a little bit of the light gray down on the side that I mixed. See, now you can see on the canvas the light gray a little bit more. So this is where it's going to be the shadows. And then as I come around to this side, I'm going to add a bit more white to my light gray. Make it a little bit lighter. I'm going over top of the sky a little bit to get the shape I want. And on this side over here, I'm going to concentrate on having mainly white on my brush to get the shape of the circle I want. And go around. My blue was a little bit wet still, so a little bit blue went in there. That's okay. I'm going to paint circles. Going smaller circles and get bigger and bigger and bigger. Get some more white on my paintbrush. Until I cover the entire snowman, concentrating on grabbing white on my paintbrush when I'm up in this area here. I'm grabbing my lighter gray when I'm down towards this area here. So I have white on my paintbrush here. I'm going up around the top of his head with my white. Now I'm putting gray on my paintbrush and I'm going around bottom with my gray. And I'm not washing my paintbrush in between changing the colors. I'm mixing a little bit on the canvas too, so I'm going back around with some more white around here. Just smoothing out some of my colors between the two, just getting them to blend a little bit. Some more white. And there's his head, and I'll do the same thing for his bottom part here. I have to mix a little tiny bit more gray, so a little tiny, tiny, tiny bit of black and white. Get that light gray again. And then, because this snowball here is going to put a shadow on this one, I'll put a bit of gray here. And the scarf's going to cover a lot of this stuff too once I put the scarf in. The edge of my snowman. Around the edge, and if I want to, I can continue painting him around the side here. If I did the sky on the side, to go right on the edge of your canvas. If you hang it up on a wall, you can see that too. Put a little more white on my palette for me. I'm going to clean my brush because I got a lot of paint gunked up on it there. Take off the extra water. So I have a very light gray just to finish filling in this part of the snowman. I'm using my biggest brush that I have just to make it go faster. Again, if I want to paint on the edge, I can paint on the edge there. If I can hang it up on a wall. Now I'm grabbing more of the white. And painting white on white, it's kind of hard to see where you're painting. But the texture and the shine of the paint is different than the canvas. So if you miss a spot when it dries, you might be able to tell a little bit. Then you can always touch it up if you need to. Fill in his whole belly. Again, I'm painting fast, but not fast enough for you. You can always fast forward me, or you could pause me if you need a little bit more time. Maybe paint's at a different rate. So there's our snowman there. So I'm going to let the white dry a little bit. I'm washing my brush now. Take off the extra water. And I'm going to a different brush now. I'm going to go to my round brush. So you can see that there's just a round instead of my bigger filbert there. I haven't used it yet, so I'm going to wet it a little bit, take off the extra water. Next thing I want to work on, I think, because the blue up here should be, oh no, it's still a little bit wet. If you have a blow dryer at home, you can take a blow dryer and blow dry your painting with the blow dryer to get it to speed up a little bit. If I paint the red on the hat now with the blue being wet still, the paints might mix together a little bit, and then I will get kind of a purplish here and there. So I'm going to let it dry for a little bit more before I do that. So while I'm waiting for things to dry here, I can maybe think about where my nose is going to go, because I have to add a little bit of white where the nose is going to stick out, or you'll see when I paint the orange on top of it, you'll see the blue from the white, just because the orange that we make is going to be transparent, which means you can see through it a little bit. So I've got some just white on my brush here. So I'm going to put his nose here. And it's going to stick out here just a little. So I just put a little where his nose is going to come out, just to cover up the white there. And then let that dry a little bit. There. I'm going to pause you for a minute here. Okay, I'm just blow drying my thing now. That's just a regular hair dryer. I'll just pause again, so you don't have to watch me blow dry it. Okay, there, now it's a bit drier after being blow dried a little bit. So I'm going to go on to his hat now, because when I put on the red, it shouldn't change it into purple now with the blue being dry. So I'm going to start by making the shape of the hat. So I'm putting some red on my palette. And the red might need 2 layers, because sometimes it can be quite transparent. Like I said, if it's going to bother you that you see the blue underneath, you could paint it white first, let it dry, or blow dry it, and then do the red on top of that. Or don't worry about that, you throw that through, or you can do a couple layers of red, or you can make it a different color hat if you want. It doesn't have to be red. So I'm going to use my small brush, because I'm going to draw the shape of the hat first. So the shape of this hat, it's just kind of like a triangle. So I like it going off the top of the canvas here, just for fun. And you can paint it over on top of the canvas. So if anybody sees the top of it, they can see that. So just a big triangle. Oh, wait, paint my paintbrush. And the tip of the hat curving down, so it comes down here and it curves down like that. And then we're going to make it curve in like that, because it's folding over, because it's a little bit floppy. And now to color in the hat, I want this area here, it's folding over, there's going to be a shadow here, because this piece of material is folding over top of the hat here. And to get the darker color, I'm going to have the tiniest bit of black. And again, this is like the size of a pepper. I'll just show you on my paintbrush here. See the tiniest. I don't know if you can see that. Probably too hard to see. Just a tiny, tiny bit of black to make the red just a slight bit darker. So I'm mixing it with some red now. So a slight bit darker. And I'm going to use this here, where this area would be in shadow. Remember, we talked about the sun's coming down this way. So this will be lighter and this will be in shadow. So I'm doing the darker red coming in on this side, curving. On that side. Get some of the dark red on my paintbrush. And then coming underneath here where it's folded. And I'm going to get some even darker red, so you can see that crease right there. So I got a little tiny, tiny bit more black to get this darker red for this little crease up in here. And maybe it's got some folds in there. I'm not cleaning my paintbrush. I'm keeping it dirty, but I'm going to add some red to the dark red I have on my paintbrush. My paintbrush is still dirty. And then from there I can just pull these colors out a little bit. So start, and then I'm going back into my red, not the dark red, but just the regular red again on the paintbrush. I'm pulling those colors out again until I'm getting to where it's just red on my paintbrush. If I want to paint up here, I can paint this up here. If you want to move to a bigger paintbrush here, you can. This is where the hat's going to go. We're going to add a little fluffy on the hat, so don't worry about how nice and neat that area is there. So I'm washing that paintbrush. Now I'm going to go to my bigger paintbrush just to speed things up. So I have my bigger paintbrush in the red, not the dark red, but just the red. And I'm going to finish this up. And pull that red into where the darker red was. And And if you want to make some lighter red, like almost like a pink, you can add that, like where the sun's hitting here if you want to. Make sure I've got all the area covered up as much as I want. Just gonna make this line here a little smoother. Pull that color in. Wash my brush. So we'll let that dry for a little bit before we add the white fluffies. And we'll go on to the white scarf. So I've cleaned my big brush. Put that down. Going back to my small brush, the small round brush again here, so I can use that to draw. And I want to draw his scarf on now. So scarf is again like a couple triangles. So I've got just the red on my brush here. And his scarf comes on this side, so it's like a curvy rectangle, I guess you call it. So that's where the scarf goes into his neck there. Kind of curves, curves. And that rectangle is going to end. I'm going to paint that in. So that's one part of a scarf, rectangle. And the other part is like a long skinny triangle coming here. So it goes skinny, goes a bit wider to here, goes down, and the triangle stops and starts on top of this rectangle here. So it started right here, and that's going to stop. Like the other side's going to start here too. That's going to go a bit wider. Then we'll fill that in. That's where the material folds underneath the scarf. Just going to get this edge a little nicer there. And then for the piece where this one's going underneath the scarf and coming out, so it's going to go from here underneath the scarf and then fall through this way. It's just another rectangle again, like a curvy rectangle. So it comes down here, curves. There's the other end of it, comes through here, comes out here, curves. And you can paint that in there. Make it a bit curved. And there goes my phone. Do little dots for those, sometimes the scarves have little knots at the end and then the long skinny things there, so I'll do little dots there. Then the other part that flips underneath and comes out, it comes from where these two meet, comes out from there, and it curves and then drops down. See how it goes there and it curves and drops down, and then it comes up and it curves and it drops down. You could probably look at the picture I have on the other side of the screen there to see the shape there. Paint that in, and then you little dots where those little knots are. I still have some of my darker black mix. If you don't, you can mix some more. So I'm going to take some of my darker black, the one that's just a little bit darker than that, and again where there's shadows. So the shadows are going to be where the scars crisscross and that. So in this one here, where I have the scarf here, there'd be a shadow. So I'm doing some of the darker red in here. And then because this scarf's underneath the scarf, there'd be some darker red. Because the shadow from this scarf on top of it. And there's some darker red. And the scarf that's in behind. So the one that's going around his neck is behind this one that's coming down on top. So it have a bit of shadow on it. And maybe there's a bit of shadow underneath there. Just going to fill in some of the spots where the white's showing through. There you go. Just smooth out this side right here a little bit more. I'll let that dry a little bit, and I can add some detail to it after if I want. Now this part here is still drying, so I'm wait for that to dry still. If you have a tiny, tiny paintbrush, you can use that to make the little strings that come down. If you have a flat brush like this that's flat, you can use the tips of that to make those lines that come down. So I'm going to use that brush. I'm going to use the corner of that brush. Get a little bit of red paint in that corner, and I'm just going to make a few little lines here for where the yarn comes down. A little bit on this side. There we go. We'll wait for that red to dry. We can go on to his nose a little bit. So for his nose, we need some of the red we have, and we're going to mix it with yellow to make it orange. So I'm put some yellow on my canvas. I'm going to start by adding just a little bit of red until I get an orange that I like. I'm going to kind of be drawing this one. I'm going to use my paintbrush that has the round paintbrush. So I'm taking some of my red, I'm adding it with the yellow. I'm going to mix it up, mix, 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 till I get an orange that I like. I think I like that orange. And if you already have orange out of a can, that's fine too. So for his nose, I'm going to roughly in the middle of his face, I want it to go to this point here. So I'm going to start at that point. And if you didn't do a white bit on your canvas that stuck out like that on your snowman for the orange thing, don't worry about it. You can just do a couple layers of orange and just don't worry about it. So to do the carrot nose, I'm going to start here. I'm going to do just little waves. I'm going to go wave, like a backwards, I guess that'd be a forward C if I'm drawing it. And then I do a little bit further, a wave, a little bit bigger, to where I want it to end, a little bit bigger. And then for the bottom, I'm going to see, I'm going to do waves. So I'm going to have the waves here, here, here. Make the nose get smaller. There. I'm going to lighten my orange a little bit, so I'm adding more yellow to my orange because I want a little bit lighter now. So more yellow to the orange mixture, so I have a lighter orange now. I'm going to use that to fill in. Just following the curves. When he's dry, I can do a second layer on him if I want to. And that, so there's his carrot nose. If I want to do the same thing I did with shadows again, I can do some darker orange on the bottom. Adding blacks, you can add black or you can add a tiny, tiny bit of blue. And again, just a tiny, tiny bit of blue to your orange. Because blue is orange's complementary color, so that's another option instead of black. And it makes your orange a little bit duller, like it was in the shadow. So I'm mixing a tiny, tiny bit of blue to a little bit of my orange. To get an orange that's kind of more like a brownie orange. I'll use up my shadow orange. I'm going to do that on the bottom part. that's where the shadow is. I can do a little bit in between the bumps on the carrot. I'll have to let it dry a little bit more. Okay, I'm gonna wash my brush there. So I have to let everything dry again for a little bit. So I will let it dry with the blow dryer, and I will pause while I dry the blow dryer so you don't have to watch me blow dry, literally watching the paint dry. All right, so we'll do that. We'll pause for now. Okay, I think we have them dry enough to keep going on again. So I'm going to add his eyes now. So I'm going to my smaller paintbrush again. And they're just coal eyes, so I'm just using black. If you want to make like googly eyes or something, you can. It's up to you. So I got my paintbrush all clean. So I want them to look like coal, so I don't need a perfect circle. So I think what I want is eyes. I want to put his eyes on a bit of an angle because I want his head tilted just a little bit. And that just because I kind of think it gives him a little bit of character. So I'm going to just dab, dab, dab. So it's not a perfect circle. You can leave him a cyclops, or you can give him another eye. I'm going to just dab, 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 dab. Same thing for his mouth. I'm going to more black my paintbrush. So I want him to have a smile because he's a happy snowman. So a little dab, 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 dab. Sorry, there goes my phone again. And then for his buttons, and that'd be nice big buttons. So this is the middle of his head, his buttons. I think his buttons will be right here. See if I can turn that down just a second here. I'm just gonna pause that while I turn that down. Okay, I think I have the volume turned down and everything now. So then here, same thing, I'm just gonna, one button. I'll give them two cool buttons. If you want to give them a little bit of texture, you can with your dirty paintbrush with black on it still. I can dip it into my like my white just a tiny bit. I can, on top of the wet paint, I can add just a tiny bit of white to, because it's mixing on the thing, just to give it a little bit of light and dark, just for a little bit of texture. I'm going to add a little bit more of the dark gray. And I'm doing this while the dots are, the black's still wet. So it's kind of mixing on the canvas a little bit. We'll go down to these buttons too. I'm going to wash the paintbrush. Now for his hat, for the fuzziness in his hat, I'm going to still use my small paintbrush, my round one that I have. I have some gray already mixed, but if you don't, you can mix some more, maybe just a tiny bit of black in with your white to make gray. And to make the, I don't know what you call it, the fur trim around his thing, I'm going to use a dab, dab, dab and swirls. So I'll do his pom-pom first. So I have just white on my paintbrush now. So I'm just dabbing globs of paint. Now I'm going to dip it into the gray and grabbing daubs of, so there's some gray showing, some white showing. Do a little bit darker gray so you can see. I don't know if you can see that on the camera or not there. So there's his pom-pom. And same thing with his fur here. I'm going to have white on my paintbrush. I'm just dabbing on top of everything. If it's not dry enough, you'll get a little bit of pink. So that just means you have to let it dry a little bit longer. And because you want it to show up against the snowman, we're going to do a little bit of the darker on the bottom where the shadow would be. Then you won't get lost in the snowman. So if you do a little bit darker underneath where his fluffy band will go. I'm running out of white on my palette. I'll have to get some more white on my palette soon. Fill that in for his with your light gray and your white. And some more white on my palette. There we go. So I have white on my paintbrush. I'm going to add a little more white at the top here. So I'll be catching the light a little bit more. So I'm just dapping it on. Some more white in here. There, and there's his fluffiness on his hat. If you want, you can add some more dark underneath where the shadow would be. I just wash my paintbrush. I'll actually paint off my paintbrush, and I take the extra water off of it. And using a gray, not quite a black, but a gray. And using the tip of my brush, I just get the gray mixed up here. I can add a shadow under here. Just follow some of the curves that you have there. You can just, if you want to, you don't have to. You can add a little bit of a shadow, a little bit darker. Just a little bit darker. Just to show the shadow. So I'm just doing little strokes going up. This is the darkest of all the colors in his the fluff of his hat. I keep calling this the snowman a he. Maybe it's a she. Maybe it's a they. Who knows? Okay. Now back to my nose again. I'm going to do a second layer of orange on the nose because I find a lot of colors show through on the orange. It doesn't cover the paint I have as well as I wanted to in one coat. So I'm going to do a second coat now that it is dry. So I'm going to concentrate on my lighter color orange around the top. Of the bumps I made. And then the darker color orange, the one where I added just a tiny bit of blue. If you have to mix more, you can mix some more. I concentrate with that color on the bottom and go up in between the segments of the nose. I have to add a little bit more blue to my orange because I used up all my color. There we go, get him all, wash my brush, get the darker color off, dry it off into my orange color again. Get so some of that canvas isn't always showing through there. There you go, a little bit better. And then to paint the birdie, so the birdie I simplified him by making just basic shapes. So basically his body is an egg shape. So we're going to start by painting the egg shape with the blue. If you make your bird blue, make sure your blue is darker than the blue of your sky or you'll lose them in it. So I'm using pure blue, not mixed with any white at all. So just some blue here. And I'm going to start with making an egg shape that's above his nose. I thought I turned that off. I didn't. Just give me a second here. Okay, I think I got that fixed now. Okay, so you're going to do an egg shape above his nose, where it's not touching his nose, it's above his nose a little bit. So I like it going half on the snowman and partway on the sky. So you just start with an egg shape, so the skinnier part of the egg is on top, and as big as you make your egg shapes, as big as your bird's going to be. Give him a big belly, so I'm not touching the orange, I'm just going above the orange. And I can fill them in and decide, do I want them bigger, do I want them smaller, do I like the size of what my bird's going to be. I think I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. I'm going to come a little bit bigger. I'm just using blue right now. Fill them in. The same things that we did last time. If you want to add a little bit of shadow, I'm adding the tiniest bit of black on my paintbrush. I'm talking pepper size again. I don't know if you can see that or not there. To get a darker blue. I'm going to use that darker blue underneath where he is. And my other blue is wet, so it's going to kind of mix on the canvas a little bit. If I have to wait for it to dry, I can a little bit, or do it when it's wet, then it mixes on the canvas. So I'm adding a little bit of that darker blue, just mixing a little bit more. For underneath his belly, kind of. I'm going to do his wing in that darker color too. So his wing, it's just a line coming down, and there's his little wing. So I've got the darker color there for his wing. I'm going to wash the darker color off my paintbrush, dry off my paintbrush. Now just the blue, not with the dark in anymore, just the blue. I'm going to do the top part of his wing there. So just a little bit of just the blue on top of the, to give him the shape of his wing there. Let that dry for a little bit, then I can do a second layer so you don't see all the streaks inside of his body and everything. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I can do his feet. If you have a little tiny brush, you can use your tiny brush for his feet. That'd be probably the easiest. You can use a marker to draw his legs and that if you have a black marker. I'm going to use my round paintbrush, very little tiny bit of paint on my paintbrush, and very little bit of pressure. So it's just a line straight down for his little legs there. So there's one little leg, the other leg, and then just a little kind of upside down Y for his toes. Maybe I'll give him 3 toes. For his little feet there. Now he's still drying before I do his beak because I want to paint some white where his beak's going to go first and the yellow on top because the yellow doesn't cover the blue very well because the yellow is very transparent. So while we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to go back to my scarf because I think I want his scarf to be bigger. To me it looks like it's tying his neck too tight and it looks like he doesn't look very comfortable. So I decided I want to make his scarf bigger. So I'm going to come out here further for his scarf. Make his scarf come out bigger. So I'm using just red. And go bigger on this side a little bit too. I do a second layer on some of the red that was kind of streaky that I don't like the way it was streaky. So I'm doing this one coming down. I want to fill that red in a little bit better. I'm going to add the tiniest bit of white to my red so I get a lighter red. So slightly, well, I get lighter red would be pink. And the top of this would be catching the light. So I'm going to go over the top of this bump here with the lighter pink a little bit, just a little bit where the light would catch that there. I've got that lighter pink, I might go and do a couple other areas where I think the light might catch it. Maybe the light's going to catch the top of this one here. Maybe the light is going to catch a little bit there. I'll keep working on the scarf a little bit there. Just going to run my brush across that line right there just to soften the edge of it a little bit. Get some more of my just plain red. Fill in some of those areas. Depending on what brand of paint you buy, what quality paint you get. You might get different results where you might have to only do it one layer or you might have to do it a couple layers. And then I'm going to wash that. I'm going to get some more of my darker red and go in some areas I think might have some shadows. So I'm adding a tiny bit of black, like a little pepper size, to some of my red. Now I'm going to go back into where I think there would be a shadow here. From where the scarf is holding it above. It would be dark in here under this thing where it's curved. Behind here would have shadows, so it'd be a bit darker. Maybe there's a wrinkle. Make a little wrinkle there with some darker if you want. This part here underneath might be a little bit darker too. Just gives it a little more depth when you do it that way. I can do some dark where these little knots are, where the threads are coming out, or yarn I guess it'd be. There's a little bit more detail on the scarf. Now my birdie should be a little bit drier now. So again, I'm using just a round paintbrush. I'm going to put white where I want his beak to go, and his beak is basically just a V, really. So I'm going to do the white first and let that dry. I want his head looking up because he's actually singing. So he's trying to get that breath out so he can sing really loud because he's a happy bird. So a little V. There's the V for his beak in white because I'll let that dry first. Now that he's dry, I want to do a second color of blue because I think my blue is still a little bit streaky. So I'm doing just straight blue on this part of his body in the middle. Get some of those streaks covered up a little bit. If you still have some of your dark blue that's not too dry yet, you can grab some of your dark blue. So I'm going to wash my paintbrush, take up some of the extra water. And my dark blue is dry, so I have to mix up a little tiny bit more of my dark blue. Painting on his underside a little bit. Oh, it's still too wet. Some more of that dark blue. Just mixing some more of that dark blue color. Underneath his little wing again. Wash my paintbrush. If you want to add a little bit of lighter blue on some of the spots where he might be a bit lighter, you can. So I'm just mixing a little bit of a lighter blue. Not too light. You don't want to blend in with the sky too much. Just get that mixed up. I'll put that color on the top of his head a little bit. And some just plain blue, fill in those streaky spots in his belly. Where his mouth is for drawing, I can give him an eye. If you want to just have a black round eye, you can use the tip of your back end of your paintbrush. So just this end here of your paintbrush, that end there. You can dip that, you see in the corner, dip that into your paint. And just try it on a palette to make the size you want and dip it. The size you want. You can use that to make a little dot for his eye. Gives him an eye. I don't know if you can see that on your screen there well enough. And that. I'll see if I can zoom that in for you guys so you can see. Let's see if I can figure this out now. Okay, let's go here. Let's see if this works. Try zooming in on him and tilting so you can see him. See, there's not too much to him. Okay, we'll put that back. Oh. There. So I'm still waiting for that white to dry a little bit. So while I'm waiting, I can go back and add some more details to maybe some more dark and light to his nose, get the details of his carrot if I want to, or I could work on more details inside here. I can use my white and touch-up smears if I want, because I got a little bit of red blob there. I can just touch that up with white. Cover that up there. And just keep working on it until you have the way that you like it. And I think that yellow is going to be dry soon, so I want him to have a yellow beak for my guy, so I'm going to use yellow on top of the white. No, it's still going to be a little bit white. So we'll make the music notes. So the same way we make the dot for his eye, we can use the back end of our paintbrush. So I just put some black paint on the back end of the paintbrush there. And I make the dots for the notes. So go dot for one note, dot for the other music note. I'm going to dip it back in the black paint again. Do another music note up here. Black paint again. Here's a music note over here. So there's the dots for the music notes. You can use a smaller paintbrush, or you can use a marker if you want to make your notes. I don't have a small paintbrush right here, so I'm going to use my bigger paintbrush that I have and just use really little pressure to get those lines and those tiny lines for the music notes. So this one I'm going to do the bar across the top. And the bars down. Now I don't play anything with music, so if I'm making these notes wrong, I'm really sorry because I don't know anything about music notes. So I'm going to do this one, the line down, and the tail. This one I'll face it the other way. This line. And the tail on the note. So there's some notes for him to sing. I'll see if his nose is dry enough yet. I can add the yellow to him. So I just washed my brush to get the black off. I'm going right into my yellow. Just the tip of my brush here. I'm going to paint over top of his white. Still a little bit wet, but it should be okay. I'll put some more paint in my paintbrush. Might be too wet still, but we'll see. And there's his yellow beak. Or her yellow beak, or their yellow beak. Now for a little bit more detail, if you want, you can add some shadow. So the shadow from the carrot is just a very light gray. So I'm taking a tiny, tiny bit of black in my white, if you don't have some light gray left over still. And the shadow would be underneath the snowman's nose here, so it would touch the snowman's nose, the shadow, and that would come like curve around because his face is curved around. So there's a shadow from his nose. You might have some shadow here from his scarf. I'm just painting under a scarf where it would leave a shadow on his, I guess snowmen don't have skin. Shadow on his, oops. A little bit of shadow here. And maybe his buttons might make a little shadow too, so a little bit of shadow underneath where the buttons would leave a shadow on his snow. His eyes too maybe have a little bit of shadow because they stick out. So if the sun's over here, the shadow would be over and underneath. And same thing with his mouth. Give him a little bit of shadows going around. So I'm just going to add some more black to his one mouth thing that got covered from the shadow that lightened it up, so this guy has to be dark. And if you want to add a little tiny white speck on the bird's eye, so his eye sparkles, you can do that. Just very, very tiny tip of white in my, and touch it very lightly and put just a little speck of white. Probably a little too much, but a little bit of white there. Use a smaller brush and get a smaller white for his eye. Yeah, that's just going around it. If you're happy with it, you leave it there. If you want to add more detail, you go back over it again, add some more detail here and there, or call it done. Up to you. Alrighty. Well, thanks for working on this painting, and yeah, hopefully we'll have some more for you soon. Okay, bye.